Good morning. And you think, why does he never know what day it is? It's like the 16th because I'm always thinking about the lesson and then I realize I have to say it's August and that's just for people who are coming across this some other time. I just want them to know when it happened. So it's Sunday, August 16th. And we're in Genesis and uh, we've been we're now about to start Genesis chapter 6. I want to finish in chapter 5. So the author of Genesis has done this great job, and that's Moses, of telling a great story to explain several things. I mean, the author of Genesis is God, but he used Moses, and he's a good storyteller. Okay, so what we've done is after Cain got upset with his brother because Cain wanted to do what he wanted to do. That's us, right? I don't want nobody telling me what to do. But God had said, no, this is the way. If you want to please me, this is the way you got to come to me. He said, come on, Cain, if you do right, it's not a problem. But if you don't do right, you'll be angry, not me, which is what happened. He says, and so now that's because that rejection that comes, that feeling of I'm not loved that we present on ourselves, not that comes from God. Oh man, I did what I wanted to do and it didn't work out. And why isn't God on my side? And then so that we have to punish. That's our reaction. I'm not happy, so I got to punish somebody. I don't want to feel unhappy, so I got to take it out on somebody else, right? So Cain's upset and he kills his brother. That'll show God. And God says, okay. He could have come after Cain, right? He could have like, this, that's it, Cain. I'm gonna smite you. But that's not interesting to God. But he did say, here's going to be the problem. You're not going to listen to me. So you have to understand a lot of these curses in the Bible is not God putting something on someone, but simply describing, here's what you're going to do and here's what's going to happen. Like I said, I would give a test in my humanities class and I would say, here's what's going to do. You're not going to study and you're going to fail. I'm not making them not study. I'm not cursing them. I'm not I'm warning them. I can already see what's happening here. You passed the first test so easily and got an A because it's chapter one and chapter one so easy. But chapter two is really hard and you're not going to study and you're going to get a fail. And then that would happen. They would go, oh, sure. Okay, so God's just telling Cain, this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen. I'm just telling you what's going to happen. The ground's not going to work for you because you're not going to listen to me as far as how to deal with the earth, how to, and you're going to try to do it on yourself, and it's not going to cooperate, and you're going to struggle. And Cain got all upset, and well, I'm going to take my ball and get out of here. Then I'm so mad at you, God. And it says that Cain left the presence of the Lord. Cain left. He now that's in his mind because we can never really get away from the presence of the Lord. It's not like there's somewhere like God's not in Dakota, so go there and then he won't be able to see you. There's nowhere on earth that God isn't. But in our minds, we can leave the presence of the Lord. In our mind, because we've shut him out. You know, he's not here. And Cain went and established his own city. So we spend the whole chapter, chapter 4, I think it is, describing Cain's city. So, and this whole city is kind of built on the foundation of we don't follow God, right? And so they go 7 generations down to Lamech, and Lamech is a perfect example of where they've gone. Like we do our own thing in this city, and it's not like they didn't have talents and all that. God doesn't punish you that way. You don't like me, I'm going to take away your ability to play the piano. God gives us his talents because the Bible says the gifts and callings of God are without repentance. Meaning he doesn't take them back. He gives your talent. Now you can use your talent for good or you can use it for bad. Oh, I'm a dancer. I'm going to dance for the Lord, or you can dance in the strip club. This is all totally up to you. Um, but he gives you that dance ability, right? So he blessed Cain's line with certain talents, and they were able to build a wonderful city. And talks about that they used bronze and steel, and they herded animals, and they did music and That's fine. But they constructed a whole civilization like we don't listen to God here. So you get to the seventh in line, and he's got two wives, and he murdered perhaps two people, and he's bragging about it, and that's where they are at that point. Like, ha, we don't need God in mouth. So when you get to the point when you're bragging about murder and you're flaunting all this stuff in God's face, that's a problem. Then in chapter 5, we go down Seth's line. So Seth is the child that replaced Abel. Well, he didn't replace him, but yeah, but the child, the son that came after Abel, right? And so he's got a godly line. And it says, see, and after this, men begin to fall. So this is the godly line, and this is the human line. the, the I do whatever man thinks is right, and this is the I try to do what God thinks is right. So they're walking after God, trying to follow God on one side, and again, Moses is telling the story. He's on purpose. He's splitting the world in half. There are the people who follow God and people who don't follow God. They had just come out of Egypt. Well, actually, at this point, because Moses is probably writing this during the 40 years, sometime during the 40, I don't know if it took the whole 40 years, but sometime during that time in the wilderness, Moses is compiling Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, right? He's compiling these books. They'd had a bad experience where Moses had seriously come down and from the mountain, right, with the Ten Commandments, and he saw that they constructed an idol because they were ready to go back to Egypt. So he's telling this is really bad. It's bad. God's not happy. And he gives them the choice. Who is on the Lord's side? And so some of them are on the Lord's side, and some said, nah, we don't want to be on the Lord's side. So they'd seen a demonstration of this sort of, these are the people who decide I'm going to try to follow God. It doesn't mean you do everything perfect. It means you're trying to follow God. And then there are the people who are trying very hard to follow the devil. And then they know it's the devil, but they're following themselves, right? And so they had just come from that experience where these are on the Lord's side, these are not. So Moses is painting the same picture. He says, this is not a new thing. It's not a new thing. We've got two civilizations going on. Seth's side and Cain's side, right? These are the people who are following after man, and these are the people. Like, simple. Okay. Leslie has a point. So we left off with Enoch. Enoch was the seventh on Seth's side, right? Lamech was the seventh on Cain's side. So he gets and it says all the days. So in Genesis chapter 5, verse 23, it says all the days of Enoch were 365 years, and Enoch walked with God. So opposite of Lamech, who mocked God and said, ha, Enoch walked with God. And so far everybody had died, because that's what you do now that we've sinned. We don't live forever anymore. We never got to eat from the tree of life and just live forever in these bodies. Our spirits live forever, but these bodies don't. So this body starts to give out, except for Enoch. It says he was not. He didn't die, but God took him. In Hebrews, so this is the last part. In the book of Hebrews, in the New Testament, hello, Stephanie and all the Jewish people who are listening to this as I'm teaching on the Pentateuch. Very cool. I'm going to the New Testament right now. In Hebrews chapter 11, verse 5, it says, by faith Enoch was taken away, so that he did not see death and was not found, because God had taken him. For before he was taken, he had this testimony that he pleased God, right? So he walked with God. He pleased God. Sometime later, we'll get into why God took him. But in Jude, who is who is it's really the cousin of Jesus, but it seems to imply in the Bible that when his father died, James and Jude, that Joseph took them in, Jesus' daddy, took them in, so they were his cousins, but they were treated like brothers. So the same word for brother sometimes use cousin, and so this is Jesus' brother cousin, and one book that he wrote. I'm going to cough. He says, now Enoch, the seventh from Adam, this is verse 14 of Jude, prophesied about these men, these wicked men, saying, behold, the Lord comes with 10,000 of his saints to execute judgment on all, to convict all who are ungodly among them of all their ungodly deeds, which they have committed in ungodly way, and of all the harsh things which ungodly sinners have spoken against him. So for some reason, Jude, who is, and they call him Jude because they don't want you to confuse him with Judas. It really is the same name, Judas, which is the Greek way of saying Judah. But so they just call him Jude because they don't want you to think Judas wrote us. What? I'm not going to read the book of Judas. So they say Jude. Somehow I don't know where he got this from, but he's telling us that Enoch prophesied of this judgment that was coming on the ungodly. Are these stories he heard in the household when he and Jesus were playing dominoes or something? I don't know. So, but he says that Enoch saw the judgment that was coming. So we've got two sides: the people who are trying to walk after God, and the people who are bragging about how they aren't walking about God. And it's the bragging part. You cannot walk after God. You can mess up, but when you're defying and you're throwing it in God's face, he goes, okay, now that's an attitude problem. That's not a problem of, oops, I made a mistake and I'm trying to do right, but I messed up. That's I like it. That's a problem, okay? And so when your attitude is like that, God's got to come and take care of you, which is what happened. So Enoch has a child, Methuselah. Methuselah lived 187 years and he begat his own Lamech, right? But this is not the evil Lamech. This is Methuselah's son. This is actually Noah's daddy. And Methuselah lived 969 years and he died. Interestingly enough, Methuselah died 1 year before, or the year, well, 1 year before the flood. And Lamech also, he actually died 5 years before the flood. So Methuselah outlived his son by 5 years. But 969 years and 960. This is living. They lived a long time, and there's a reason for that. We'll get into that later. Okay, so in verse 31, I'm still in Genesis chapter 5. All the days of Lamech were 777 years, and then he died. So Methuselah, his dad, lived 969 years. The son only lived 777 years. 777, probably some symbolism in there. And then he died. So, and he died 5 years before his dad, and all this is before the flood. So when the flood comes, which we're going to get to, Noah's the last. I mean, Noah has sons and daughters, but his father, his grandfather are gone. That's why he didn't take them into the ark, because they were dead. And the ark was going to smell enough with all the animals. You didn't need to have dead bodies in the ark. So Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begat Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So Noah has three kids. So interesting when we get into these three kids of Noah. Oh my God. Where they ended up and who they married and all that. But we'll get there. Because Moses, and now we're at the beginning of chapter 6, Genesis chapter 6, he's still telling his story. So you've got two generations, right? You've got two, not generations, but you've got two kingdoms. They love God over here, hate God over there. So what's the problem? Everything's fine, right? Keep the good kingdom, destroy the bad kingdom. Well, so Moses is saying, if only it had stayed, but he's letting us know they did not stay separate. That was the problem. If they had stayed separate, it wouldn't have been a problem. But then they started to intermingle. So, and this language has just been so misinterpreted for years. It's like people, if you just read the whole Bible, it's really difficult to misinterpret things. Just read the story that's being told, right? So Genesis chapter 6, verse 1 says, and it came to pass when men began to multiply in the face of the earth, the daughters were born unto them. Okay, so you're saying only sons were born unto them before, and now daughters are born? Like, how were they multiplying before? So let's dissect that. So he's talking. So he's given us 7 generations. Lamech, the evil Lamech, 7 generations. Enoch, right? Then he actually mentions a few more on Enoch's side. His son Methuselah, his son Lamech, right, on that side, and then his grandson, great grandson, Noah. But she says, before I get to Noah, let me tell you what happened. We got 7 generations down, and we were doing pretty good, right? Everybody was separate, Enoch and everybody was separate. Then this multiplication thing starts to happen. Now it's okay when you can't go from 2 to 4 to 8 to 16 to 32, but then you go to 64. Then there's 128, 256, and then the next leap is 512, and then there's 1,024. And so most people, it had been multiplying normally, and then it got to a place once you get into the seventh power of that it just multiplies. So now the earth's being full, right? Filled up. So as we said, it came past it began to multiply because everybody's having kids and then their kids are having kids. And so now that these daughters are being born unto them, now when the daughters are being born, there's just a lot of people and there are more choices and people start to mingle. And in verse 2, it says, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men and that they were fair. So the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. Now, he calls one God and he calls the other group the daughters of men. The sons of God went to the daughters of men, and they said, but some people look at this and go, no, the sons of God, that literally means the sons of God. So they think that Moses is introducing a whole new group that he hasn't been talking about all this time. Now, again, Cain had kids, Seth had kids. He's been talking about 2 groups. But there are people who read this. Well, the problem is they start here, they don't go back. They just open up the Bible and you turn, and ooh, the sons of God saw the daughters of men. They must be talking about angels. Those are the sons of God, the literal sons of God, as though God had babies. And they saw the daughters of men. Because why would he say the daughters of men unless the sons of God were coming from heaven and they were angels and having sex with the daughters of men? Now, so if you start here, I could see you coming to that conclusion. If you've been reading for 5 chapters, you know the 2 groups he's talking about. This is why are they called the sons of God? That must mean they're angels. Well, Romans, the book of Romans in the New Testament, chapter 8, verse 14, says, for as many as are led by the Spirit of God, these are the sons of God. So if you're being led by the Spirit of God, if you're in the group that's being led, you're trying to follow him, you can fall and trip, you can stumble, you can mess up, but you are following him. He's leading you, and you're the sheep and he's the shepherd, and you're following him, then you're called a son of God. Doesn't mean you're an angel. You're not another being from some other. You're a son of God. And in Hosea, so if we just let's take what we would call Old Testament scripture. So my Jewish friends, forgive my language. We've got the Old Testament and then what we call the New Testament. So we'll take an Old Testament scripture, Hosea chapter 1, verse 10, which says, yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea. So the people, again, that multiplication factor. Once Israel had been born, right? He was originally Jacob, and then God changed his name to Israel. The number of the children that shall come out of him and the generation shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured or numbered. Because God's going to protect those people and preserve that line. There will always be Jews, always. Yay. And so God's going to protect that line. Even if some people have to change their name in order to hide from, the Germans or something, that family line is going to be preserved. They're still going to live. Not that they wouldn't be attacked. Oh my Lord, the devil's trying to kill. The devil has to try to kill the Jews because God has promised them so much. In fact, the devil's ends because of the like the line of Israel. Those are the people that bring right, and all this prophecy is fulfilled. The Messiah comes through the Jews. So the devil's like trying so hard to kill the Jews, but God's like, no, I will preserve the Jews. They must live. And you know, that's always our prayer that God protects the Jews, right? So there's going to be, as the sands, and there'll be a number of them that cannot be measured. And it shall come to pass in the place where it says to them, you are not my people. There it shall be said to them, you are sons of the living God. So in that place where you don't belong to God, you're not. Yes, those are the sons of the living God. Those Jewish people that you may want to say, you don't follow God. You Christians, you may want to look at them and says, no. In that place where it's said to them, because the Jews are still touched by God, anointed by God, protected by God, loved by God. And so in that place where you might want to say, you are not my people, it'll be said of those people, he's talking about the Jews, you are the sons of the living God. And again, he's using the word sons of the living God, just like when he was referring to the Christians in Romans. If you're led by Spirit, you are the sons of God. So here in Genesis chapter 6, verse 2, when it says the sons of God came down, I don't know why people think, well, those must be angels. It just means people who follow God. So the people who follow God, on the one hand, started finding attractive that group of people who just followed after men. And there's this intermingling that's taking place. But just in case you're not convinced, you think, no, this was angels. It was angels who came down because look what happened when they got together. They gave birth to the Nephilim. And so we'll get there. Uh, Jesus said in Matthew chapter 22, verse 30, in the resurrection, when they came to Jesus to ask him, so let's say, you know, a man, because it was a Jewish tradition at the time, during this time period, that if your brother's married and he dies, you take in his wife and his family. We think that's what Joseph did. Joseph and Mary, that he took in his brother's kids, right? You take in their wife. And then, but what if you have another brother and his wife dies? You take them in too. And we have another brother and his wife. He's like, so the Pharisees are trying to trip up Jesus. So he says, like, so when you get to heaven, which wife is actually yours? Because like, you got 7 wives. Let's say that happens 7 times. You got 7 wives. Ah, like Jesus is going to go, oh man, I never thought of that. You guys are good. Oh, well, there's no heaven. You're right. You got me. But Jesus says, in the resurrection, they neither marry nor are given in marriage. For they're like the angels of God in heaven. The angels of God in heaven don't marry, they don't have kids. Once we get to heaven in the resurrection, there's no that that part about that need to procreate and continue the species, and that won't exist anymore, right? We won't. Right now, we're going to die. So, yay for the people who are having kids. And because we won't be here forever, there'll be people after us, and then there'll be people after them. So, in order for Earth to survive, people have to keep having kids. So, God bless you, people who do that. And then they need to have kids, and they need to. But that won't be true in the resurrection. We'll all live forever. So that part of us will be gone. We'll live forever. So the billion of us who are up there, or wherever it is, in heaven, there's no marriage and having kids and all that stuff. He says that you'll be like the angels. The angels don't marry and have kids, which means that when the sons of God came down in Genesis chapter 2, they weren't angels. It says they took wives and had kids. And Jesus said, the angels don't do that. In Luke chapter 20, verse 34 through 38, Jesus answered and said to them, this is the same question, but this time he got more specific. Here's Luke's version of it. It says, the sons of this age marry and are given in marriage. This is Luke 20, chapter 34. The sons of this age, meaning this present age that we are living in, they're married, given in marriage. They're worthy to attain that age that you're talking about in the resurrection, when the new Jerusalem comes down and all this is done with, and we're all in heaven. So if you're kind of worthy to make it into that group, into that number, and the resurrection from the dead, and you won't marry or be given in marriage. That's not a thing. Nor can they die anymore, for they are equal to the angels and are sons of God. So the people who make it there will be called the sons of God, being sons of the resurrection. So And besides, the angels, it couldn't have been the angels when he says the sons of God came down and married the daughters of men. And it sounds really cool, like it's a good fantasy novel, you know, and but it just means Seth's group married Cain's group. Um, Here's another reason why it's not angels. It's not angels because the angels that sinned, there weren't rogue angels floating around having sex with men and women. The angels that sinned, darkness. They're not just hanging out. Because this would have been the angel. Okay, in Revelation chapter 12, verse 7 through 9, there's a war broke out in heaven. Oh, I got to hurry. War broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought with the dragon. So this is before Adam and Eve got to, there was a war in heaven, right? Michael and his angels are fighting against Lucifer and his angels. And the dragon and his angels fought, and he calls him the dragon, but it's the devil. But they did not prevail, they lost. Nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. So the great dragon was cast out. That's the devil. That serpent of old called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth. So the devil was cast to the earth. And his angels were cast out with him. But where did they end up? So specifically, it says the devil was cast to the earth. Now the angels were kicked out. The angels that followed the devil, they were kicked out. Where are they? Were they just floating around waiting to have sex with the men and women on earth, the daughters of men? No. Jude 1, verse 6. There's only one book of Jude. That's why I'm saying Jude 1. Jude, verse 6, says, and the angels who did not keep their proper domain, but left their own abode. So God had a place for them in heaven, but they said, nah, we don't like this. We want more. He has reserved an everlasting chains under darkness for the judgment of the great day. So he says, those angels that followed that, they're not in earth. He's reserved them in everlasting chains under darkness. It says the same thing in 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 4. For God did not spare the angels who sinned, but cast them down to hell and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved for judgment, and did not spare the ancient world, but saved Noah, one of 8 people. There was only 8 people who were saved. Noah and his wife. Those got 3 sons and their wives. So there's 8 altogether. He's a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood on the whole world ungodly. So he says that God didn't spare them. You know he's not going to spare these other people who messing up. But so the angels are in chains. So these are not angels coming down and having sex. The sons of God found the daughters of men attractive, but they're not a group of angels who came down and had sex. They're just the 2 groups that Moses had been talking about: Seth's family and Cain's family. He detailed the 2 generations. I mean, all the generations, and he's telling the same story. Moses is not telling a different. He's not introducing new characters out of nowhere. So the sons of God is simply referring to the people who are following him. If you're led by the Spirit of God, you're a son of God. So the people who are trying to follow God, but it didn't last. If only it had lasted. If only there had just been 2 separate, then God could have just destroyed those bad people, like Enoch predicted. But that's what Moses is saying. They started to intermarry, and that's the problem. So getting back to Genesis chapter 6, and Moses is telling us what happened. So Genesis chapter 6, verse 3. And the Lord said, so now there's no difference, right? There's not a good set and a bad set. As the generations started coming down, starting with after Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, and even Noah, all this intermarrying is going on. So you're not able to distinguish who really are following God and who's not. And I got to tell you, sometimes it's easier to separate yourself from the sinners, because if you want to be righteous, you kind of have to construct it. The sinners won, is what I'm trying to say. When they started to intermingle, you would think, oh, all the good people who were following God became an influence. But sin is just so big and exciting and tempting and lurid that they actually won. So once they started to intermingle, the people who were following God became fewer and fewer and fewer. In fact, it came down just to Noah. At one point, there was only one family left. And then generations from Enoch, 3 generations. Okay, so the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with man. Flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. So where before people were living, because he's just flesh, but I'm not going to keep, because God is waiting for everybody to get it together. I mean, when Cain first sinned and then went and left the presence of God and founded his own city and his own thing, and then everybody, God's like, come back, come back. Okay, I'll wait. I'll wait. And he's waiting generation after generation after generation, and things are just getting worse. So he says, you know what? I'm not going to, there's, God has limits to his patience, but it's a big patience. I mean, like, because I don't, now if somebody's going, yes, God, he's tired of me, he's ready to judge me. This went over hundreds and thousands of years where God was forgiving people. Don't forget, people lived 900 years at a time. So God was patient, 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 because that's how he is. But it's like, okay, my spirit's not going to always strive. Like, I'm about to save everybody out of the pool. So, and then I'm going to change it so that it's only 100, the man only lives 120 years instead of 900 years. There are some reasons for that. But I just want to look at the scripture in Luke chapter 17, Matthew, Mark, right? Verse 27, it says, and as it was in the days of Noah, so it will also be in the days of the Son of Man. So Jesus is giving a warning also. He says, just like when God gave a warning through Noah and saying, okay, you guys need to get it together or bad stuff's coming. He says it's going to be during this generation right now. Jesus is saying, I'm here to give you a warning. And just like people didn't listen to Noah, you guys are not listening to me. And so, uh, and we might be saying the same thing today. You know, God's giving warnings. Okay, things are getting out of hand. People are really becoming really crazy. And judgment ultimately follows. But God is so patient. But at a certain point, you're like, okay, that's it. I keep warning you guys. Now I'm turning, you guys, you have to go home. All right. So they says they ate, they drank, they married. We're back in Luke chapter 27. They married wives. They were given in marriage until the day that Noah entered in the ark. So Noah kept preaching and warning, and they just kept laughing and you know what you're talking about, which is part of the problem with God being so patient. It people think, oh well, he's forgotten, but God doesn't forget. When if he warns, he's going to do it. But because it doesn't happen instantly, because he's merciful, he's giving us room to repent. People just keep on their sin. It's like a speed trap, you know. You keep speeding, 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 and if no one ever gets arrested, you just think, oh, I can ignore this sign. The sign says 30 in a school zone, but I've been doing 60, nothing's ever happened. And because nothing's ever happened, we just think, instead of thinking, wow, God was merciful, I really should have gotten a ticket yesterday. We just do it again. And instead of thinking, wow, look how merciful God is, that's the fourth time in a row I sped through that zone and no one stopped me. You know, I need to really, I guess nothing's going to happen. So it says they were eating and drinking up until the day he walked in the ark. Noah preached for years. There's judgment coming, but since God didn't hit him instantly, he says until the day he shut the door, people still were laughing at Noah. You're crazy. All right. So in Genesis chapter 6, verse 4. So God's switching it, right? So that now man only lives 120 years after the flood. And there's a reason, right? Because because it had never rained, right? In Noah's day, it had never rained. And so, but the earth had this canopy of water above it that kind of blocked out the harmful rays of the sun. And so the normal aging process wasn't happening. And water didn't come from above, it came from the earth and watered the fruit. And so water, all these rich minerals that are deep in the earth, the water that came up to water them were just full of richness and all the, you know, the stuff that people need. And you've tasted fruit that's just full and rich and of minerals and stuff that's like really watered down. Like there's nothing in that for you. That iceberg lettuce, there's no vitamins in it for you. You got to eat the kale. Ugh, I hate kale, but that's what you got to eat. And so everything was like, today we're just eating iceberg lettuce, but back in Noah's day, they're eating kale, you know, and so their bodies just lasted longer because they weren't getting it from the sun and everything is reached. And so, but God's like, once I send this flood, then that canopy is going to be gone and the sun's going to get you. And I'm no longer going to water the earth from down below, but from above. And so people live about 120 years. And that's fine because that'll give them, that's 120 years they need to get their lives together. And that's long enough. Okay. So Genesis chapter 6, verse 4 says, and there were giants in the earth in those days. Why is Moses saying that? People think, well, when the angels came down and had sex with the humans, they produced giants. They produced Nephilim. That's what Nephilim means, giants. Nephilim doesn't mean a half angel, half man. A Nephilim is a giant. And they were giants. There are giants in the earth today. Please walk onto a basketball court and stand next to Yao Ming and Evox Zubox, whatever and Anthony Davis and Shaquille O'Neal. They're giants, and you feel like a grasshopper when you stand near them and go, "Oh my God!" But they're just, But hey, 7'2", next to 5'4", you feel like, ah. So they weren't giants that were like 30 feet tall. There were people that were 7 foot tall. And why is Moses bringing up the giants? Because he's saying, there were giants in those days. Because he's saying giants didn't just start today. What had just happened? Why is, when Moses writing this book, why is he including this? Okay, in Numbers chapter 13, remember after they'd had that incident in Mount Sinai, and those who were on the Lord's side made their choice, we're going to follow the Lord, and other people were swallowed up in an earthquake that opened up and swallowed them up. He takes them to this mountain. They can see the Jordan, and they can see Canaan land, which is the land that Israel is currently occupying right now. And God's saying, that's what your land I'm sending you, that belongs to you. Numbers chapter 13, verse 1 and 2. And the Lord spake to Moses, saying, send men to spy out the land of Canaan. Again, that's the land where they currently are occupying Israel right now, which I am giving to the children of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers you shall send a man, every one a leader among them. So he says, I'm giving you that land. So why is he sending them to spy it out? Like if somebody says, hey, I'm giving you a house, why don't you go check it out? Just you can go check it out. But that wasn't contingent on whether or not God was giving him the land. Just go check it out. I'm going to buy you that car. You should go check it out. See how. Okay. So verse 17, then Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan and said to them, go up this way to the south, go up to the mountains. I'm in Numbers chapter 13. And see what the land is like, whether the people who dwell in it are strong or weak, few or many, whether the land they dwell in is good or bad, whether the cities they inhabit are like camps or strongholds. So you'll be prepared when you go in. You'll just know who, okay, those people are strong. I got to watch out for them. Those people are weak. We got it. Those we can take. Just check it out. But he wasn't asking their opinion. God's not asking our opinion because he's going to do what he's going to do. But verse 31 says, but the men who had gone up with him said, oh, we're not able to go up against those people. They're stronger than us. And God's like, what? I'm going to fight them. Did I not just part the Red Sea and destroy the, like, what? But that's how we are. We when we run up a new thing, the doctor will say, hey, we just found bladder cancer. Well, we freak out. And God's like, didn't I just heal? Have I not healed you like 20 times already in your life of major things? Why are you freaking out over this? I'm still God. I haven't gone anywhere. But we freak out when we get new news, that God, this is happening or that's happening. And we think, oh, God's out of money now. Oh, no, that broke. Oh, my car radiator. Ah, and God's like, I've been paying your bills. You think you've been paying? I've been paying your bills all this time. I can still pay your bills. I'm not broke. But that's how they're treating God, and that's how we treat God. In verse 33, here's another reason. This is Numbers chapter 13, verse 33. They get really specific. The spies who came back, he says, there we saw giants. The descendants of Anak came from giants. So these are the descendants of Anak, A-N-A-K. And we were like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight. So these children of Anak, they said, we can't fight them. So as you know the story, God got mad and said, okay, then I will let you wander around the wilderness for 40 years. And this is when Moses, the Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Number, Deuteronomy. And that's why he says, there were giants in those days, just like there are giants now. So this is not a new thing. You're acting like, because they I guess they hadn't seen giants, but no, Moses is saying there's always been giants. They're the sons of Anak. Well, here's the deal. They didn't. God won't. God's going to make you face your giants. He's going to make you face them. He's not going to take them away. You can't. So things that we're avoiding now, you will have to deal with it at some point in your life because God wants you to wrestle that giant and win. He will fight the battle for you. But there's stuff that we're ignoring that you can't ignore. You're going to have to fight that giant or let God fight that giant. But you got to step up and then let God do something. But you can't keep avoiding things. So there's some giants in your life that you're avoiding. You can't. Uh, 40 years later, when they finally went in and crossed the Jordan, in Joshua chapter 11, verse 22, the first part of it, it says, uh, Joshua went in. It's not what it says, but Joshua went in. They started fighting because now they're finally ready to go. It's 40 years later. All those people who said no, we can't do it, they're gone, and the new generation is finally there who says yes, we can do this because we have God on our side. So they went in and they started conquering people, and they're chasing the Anakim. These are the Anakim are the descendants of Anak. So they're chasing these giants. So verse 22 says, none of the Anakim were left in the land of the children of Israel because they chased them all out. They remained only in 3 cities. They were stupid. They let him go and hide in 3 cities. One of them was Gaza, the other was Gath, and the other was Ashdod. So let's these 3 cities, and then I'm going to have to be finished. I'm taking so much time. So in Gath, right, that's where they chased them to. A couple hundred years, but they never got rid of them. They never did what God said. They never faced them down. In 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 4, the Philistines are ready to attack. This is a couple hundred years later. David, because the Philistines are the ones who took the ark from the children of Israel, crossed the Jordan with the ark, and they should have killed all the giants, but they didn't. They let some go to Gath. So now the Philistines took their ark. We got your ark. They hid it in Ashdod, and now David and them, they want to get it back. So the Philistines have come back and they're taunting them. It says, and a champion, verse 4, 1 Samuel chapter 17, and a champion went out from the camp of the Philistines named Goliath from Gath. So Goliath was another giant from Gath. Because remember, they let all the Anakim flee to Gath, and instead of pursuing them there and letting God give them the victory, they said, oh, that's good enough. They're in Gath. They're not going to bother us anymore. So now here are the Philistines back bothering them. So Goliath was from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. And the Philistines said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. So I defy. You say that you have God on your side. I defy you. And they're scared. Oh, no, there's a giant. And I'd be scared of Shaquille O'Neal if he came at me. Unless God said, don't worry, I'll fight him for you. Then I'm not worried. Because God, really tall. So then David shows up in verse 45, same chapter of 1 Samuel chapter 17. Then David said to the Philistine, you may come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you've defied. So God sent me. So you can have a sword and a spear, but I got God. And we need to have that confidence when people are coming at us. I'm sorry, I got God on my side. So why am I worried? Verse 46, this day the Lord will deliver you into my hand. Because this is the promise that God had made to them way back on the mountain when they were with Moses and said, no, we can't defeat them. And like, yes, you can. No, we can't. But David said, God's word is always true. So whenever we finally take God up on his word, it could be 4 centuries later. He's still going to come through because God always comes through on his word. If he's made a promise, he's going to fulfill it. So if there's something God told you to do 35 years ago, it's still there waiting to be fulfilled. And you can walk into it. He hasn't. God doesn't say, oh, well, forget it. God never says, oh, well, forget it. Whatever he's promised, he's going to do. It's right there. So that's why David knew he could defeat Goliath of Gath. He says, in this day I will give you the carcass of the camp. I give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air. So I'm going to strike you and I'm going to take your head from you. And I'm going to give your dead body to the Philistines and the wild beast birds and all that, so that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And there's still a God in Israel. So um, David wins against Goliath because he stepped out on faith and knew God had promised he would take care of these giants, even though we drove them to Gath. So whatever giants, they're still waiting there. God will defeat them. Now, I just want you to know that he sent them to three cities, Gath, Ashdod, and Gaza. In Ashdod, I'll just quickly tell you that the Philistines who and the giants that were in Ashdod, they're the ones who took the ark. They took it to Ashdod. I don't need to read it, but you can read it in First Samuel chapter 5. Now they took the ark from the Israelites and they took it to Ashdod. That's the third, because there are three cities: Gath, Ashdod, and Gaza. And when they took the ark and they took it to their temple, the temple of Dagon, the statue, when they came in the morning, Dagon's statue had fallen down. And this like happened 3 days in a row because God knocked that statue down. The ark sitting there and Dagon sitting there. And every time they came in the morning, Dagon's statue had been knocked down. And then they all got boils and they got rid of that thing and took it out of Ashdod. And Ashdod was ultimately conquered, let's see, by uh, the Greeks, the Romans, the Byzantines, the Arabs, the Crusaders, the Turks, and then finally the United Nations took it over recently and gave it back to the Jews. So the Jews ended up with Ashdod anyway, but it took 2,000 years. Well, no, I guess that's probably like 6,000 years from the time God had originally given it to them. But they never took it. They never took Gath. They let Goliath go up there. They never took Ashdod. So they eventually, and Gaza. Okay, this is the same Gaza that we read about. This is from yesterday. This happened in Gaza yesterday because again, they never did what they were supposed to do. Here it says Israeli aircraft bombed several sites belonging to the militant Hamas group in the Gaza Strip for the fifth night in a row, the Israeli military said early Sunday. So the Hamas, they're in Gaza Strip, and the Israel that has not been able to take control over Gaza yet because it's still a problem. So when the when Joshua finally crossed the Jordan, there were three cities that he drove those giants to: Gath, where Goliath came from; Ashdod, who ended up taking the ark from them; and Gaza, which they've still never controlled to this day. And I'm just saying, this is from the newspaper just yesterday. Israel's still sending fighter aircraft over Hamas in Gaza. And so when God tells us to do something, I want you to go in and take care of that problem now. If you don't, God's not guessing. He says, that's going to remain a problem for you until you take care of it. Israel's trying to take care of Gaza now. Until we take care of this stuff, it remains. It remains. God knows what he's doing. So I'm just about to finish here. Um, so it says, Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, it says, they were giants in the earth in those days. And Moses is telling them this, saying the giants that we're facing, they didn't just start here. They started back even before the flood. After that, when the sons of God, those are Seth's people, came into the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which are of old, and men of renown. So that blending of the two camps, the people who are trying to follow God and the people who are trying to follow men, produced mighty men of renown, great men. They produced giant. I mean, it's not like physically something horrible thing was happening. You can't judge on the outside. It says, yeah, they were mighty men who built great cities and all this stuff. Incredible stuff happened because you had these people who were following God who were mixing in, and but slowly they started just petering out. The people who were following God, and they built great monuments and huge cities, and all this incredible stuff is happening. But now the city is becoming more important than God. And now their monuments and their accomplishments are now coming from, and those few people who were following God, the only ones that were left were Noah and his three sons. And let's not be clear if all three of his sons are following God or not. But when we're talking about the mixing, that means that Noah's sons, one of Noah's sons, went out and married one of the children of the daughters of men, right? I'm saying right, like you can hear me. But so it's not like Noah's family was exempt from that. Now they're still following God, but one of his sons married one of those daughters of men from the other camp, and her genealogy came onto the ark with them. And when they started having kids, and their kids had kids, they still have that DNA, that giant DNA. And so that's who, so Moses is saying these giants started way back then. They continued, they got into the ark. And now when we come to Canaan, people, the giants still exist. Now, it doesn't mean everybody who's tall is evil. Moses is simply explaining giants didn't just start just now. They've always been with us. And there, you can be 7'2" and love God, and you can be 4'2" and hate God. So it has nothing. It's not that. But I'm saying her DNA. She brought that onto the ark, and so we know that giants came from her land. And Genesis chapter 6, from her land, from her DNA. Okay, so Genesis chapter 6, verse 5 says, "And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually." And that's what had happened. That's what happens when you take your eye off God and just start thinking about yourself, what you can do for yourself. After a while, evil just begets more evil, but begets more evil, and you don't even people don't even realize it just becomes the culture. But separating yourself from God, all you can do is produce evil. I mean, these are the two. God's always trying to say there's two choices. You're either following God and what you're doing is godly, or you're following after man and what man thinks is right. And it becomes more ungodly, more ungodly, more ungodly. So God's like, okay, I got to do something about this, which he does. So we will continue because Noah's about to show up. And uh, we will continue with Noah and the ark, etc. And what happened after the ark with his three kids, which is incredible. I love the Bible. It's so interesting. These are like the best stories. Okay, and those of you who go to my church, or anyone, if you want to stay tuned for Pastor Grimm on his Facebook channel, Renandis Grimm. And I'll see some of you Wednesday night at 7 o'clock for my Bible study. Thank you so much for tuning in. And we will leave it there in live video.